The desert wind carried the smell of dust, sage, and sun-baked earth as the three sisters stood near the split-rail fence at the edge of their father's land. Evening stretched long and quiet, the sky painted in shades of copper and fading gold. It was the hour when shadows grew tall and the world seemed to hold its breath. Beyond the cabin, the land rolled outward in dry waves of scrub and stone, broken only by distant mesas that glowed red in the dying light. They were known among the scattered settlements as the Virgin Sisters. The name had followed them for years, whispered with curiosity, sometimes respect, sometimes envy. Since their mother's death, their father had guarded them fiercely, believing the world beyond their land was sharp and unforgiving. He had raised them with rules as solid as the fence posts that marked their boundary. But on that evening, their father was away, gone to trade supplies, leaving the sisters alone with the quiet and with one another. Elena, the eldest, stood closest to the fence. Her dark hair was braided neatly down her back, and her posture carried the calm authority of someone used to responsibility. She had learned early how to keep fear from her voice and doubt from her hands. People often mistook her for older than her years, because grief had forced her to grow faster than she wished. Maribel leaned against the fence beside her, arms crossed, eyes narrowed as she scanned the horizon. She was sharper in every way, her words, her thoughts, her judgments. She questioned everything, especially the stories they had been taught about the land and the people beyond it. Still, fear lived close to her surface, quick to rise and quicker to hide behind anger. Sophia lingered a step behind them, toes tracing patterns in the dust. The youngest sister often seemed half-present, her mind wandering places her body had not yet seen. She noticed small things others missed, the way birds fell silent before a storm, the change in wind that came before trouble. Her silence was not weakness, but listening. The quiet shattered with the distant thunder of hooves. All three sisters froze. The sound came again, closer this time, steady but uneven. Elena's hand moved instinctively to the fence rail as she squinted into the distance. A single rider emerged from the shimmering heat haze, his outline wavering like a ghost. He rode not like a man lost or desperate, but like someone deeply familiar with the land, moving as if the desert itself guided him. "He's alone," Sophia whispered. "And hurt," Elena added as the figure drew nearer. As the rider approached, the details became clearer. He was Apache, unmistakably so, the cut of his hair, the way he sat his horse, the quiet authority in his posture despite the visible strain. Dark blood soaked the fabric at his shoulder, clinging and drying under the sun. The horse slowed as it reached the edge of the sisters' land, its head lowered, sides heaving. The man swayed, fighting to remain upright. Maribel took a sharp breath. "Elena, he's Apache." "I see that," Elena replied quietly. "You know what father said," Maribel continued, her voice tight. "We're not supposed to." Before she could finish, the warrior slid from his horse and dropped to one knee, one hand braced against the ground. Dust rose around him. He did not reach for a weapon. He did not threaten. He simply knelt, breathing hard, as though the effort of staying conscious demanded everything he had left. Sophia's heart hammered as their eyes met for a brief moment. His gaze held pain, yes, but also restraint. There was no hunger for violence there, no challenge. Only exhaustion. He spoke slowly, his English broken but clear enough. "I ask, water," he said, pausing between words. "Then I go." The desert stretched silent around them. The wind whispered through dry grass, carrying the weight of the moment. Helping him could invite danger, from settlers who hunted Apache warriors without question, from his own people who might misunderstand their intentions. Turning him away would almost certainly mean his death. The wound on his shoulder was deep, and the desert was merciless. Maribel's jaw tightened. "We can't help him," she said, though uncertainty flickered behind her eyes. "If anyone sees him here." "He'll die if we don't," Sophia said softly, surprising herself with the steadiness of her voice. Elena felt the pull of both truths. She had been taught caution, obedience, survival. But she had also been taught compassion by a mother who believed kindness was never wasted, even when it cost something. She looked at the man bleeding into their dust, then at her sisters, one afraid, one hopeful, both waiting for her to decide. "If we leave him," Elena said quietly, "we decide who we are." The words settled heavily between them. The Apache warrior lowered his gaze, as if already accepting whatever choice they made. His shoulders sagged, strength draining fast. Elena stepped forward. Maribel inhaled sharply. "Elena." "We will give him water," Elena said. "And we will see how bad the wound is." Sophia moved instantly, fetching a canteen from the fence post. She knelt and offered it carefully, her hands trembling just slightly. The warrior took it with both hands, nodding in gratitude before drinking slowly, deliberately, as though afraid to waste even a drop. When he finished, he pressed a hand briefly to his chest. "Thank you," he said. Elena motioned toward the cabin. "You can rest inside. Just until we stop the bleeding." Maribel hesitated, then moved to help support him when he tried to stand and nearly collapsed. She caught his arm without thinking, surprised by how light he felt, how human. The moment unsettled her more than fear ever had. Together, the three sisters helped the Apache warrior toward the cabin, the sun slipping fully behind the hills as night began to claim the desert. None of them spoke, but all of them understood that something irreversible had just begun. A single choice, made in the fading light, had crossed a line older than any of them, and whatever came next would change every life connected to that moment. The cabin was dim and cool compared to the fading heat outside, its thick wooden walls holding the last traces of daylight. Elena guided the wounded man to the small table near the window, easing him onto a chair while Sophia hurried to light the oil lamp. Its flame flickered, casting long shadows that danced across the walls, making the space feel smaller and more fragile than it ever had before. Maribel shut the door firmly, sliding the wooden latch into place. The sound echoed in the quiet room, final and heavy. For a moment, no one spoke. The Apache warrior sat still, jaw clenched, breathing slow and controlled as blood continued to seep through the torn fabric at his shoulder. "My name is Elena," she said at last, her voice calm. "This is Maribel." "Sophia." He inclined his head slightly. "Taza," he replied. "I thank you. I do not wish trouble." "We don't either," Maribel said, more sharply than she intended. Elena shot her a warning glance before turning back to Taza. "Let me see the wound." Taza nodded and carefully loosened the cloth at his shoulder. When the fabric pulled away, Sophia gasped softly. The wound was deep, the skin torn and angry, the blood dark where it had begun to dry. Elena forced herself not to hesitate. She fetched water, clean cloth, and the herbs their mother had once taught her to use for infections. As Elena worked, her hands steady despite the stakes, Maribel stood near the door, listening for any sound outside, hoofbeats, voices, anything that might signal danger. Her thoughts raced. If settlers came looking for Apache warriors, the cabin would not protect them. If Taza's people came, they might not trust three settler women standing over one of their own. Sophia watched everything in silence, her eyes moving between Elena's hands and Taza's face. She noticed the way he never flinched, even when the cloth pressed hard against raw flesh, and how his gaze remained respectful, never wandering where it did not belong. "You should have let me go," Taza said quietly after a while. "This land is not kind to those who stand between worlds." Elena tied the bandage firmly. "Maybe it's time someone did." He looked at her then, really looked, as if weighing the truth of her words. "You risk much," he said. Night settled fully outside, bringing with it the distant calls of animals and the sharp clarity of stars. The sisters shared a simple meal with Taza: bread, dried meat, water. He ate slowly, carefully, as though mindful of every bite given freely. When the lamp burned low, Elena offered him a blanket and gestured toward the narrow bed against the wall. "You can rest," she said. "At least for the night." "I will leave before sunrise," Taza replied. "Staying longer brings danger." Sophia surprised them all by speaking. "You're not strong enough yet." Maribel turned toward her. "Sophia." "He's right," Sophia continued, her voice soft but unyielding. "But so is Elena. Sending him out like this doesn't keep us safe. It just makes us responsible for what happens." The truth of it settled heavily over them. Just before dawn, tension snapped into sharp focus. Maribel stiffened first, hearing it, the unmistakable sound of multiple horses approaching fast. She moved to the window, peering through the crack in the shutters. "Riders," she whispered. "Settlers." Elena's heart pounded. Taza tried to stand, swaying as pain lanced through him. He reached for his weapons, fingers tightening around the familiar shapes as if they alone could steady him. "I will go," he said. "I will not bring war to your door." Elena stepped in front of him. "You won't make it far," she said. "And running will only prove their fears right." Outside, voices carried on the wind, sharp and impatient. The riders were close now. Another sound followed, faint, distant, but unmistakable to Taza. Smoke signals rose far off toward the hills, thin lines against the pale sky. His people were searching for him. The cabin stood at the center of it all, caught between two forces that had learned only conflict. Elena took a breath and made her choice. "We'll speak to them." Maribel stared at her. "Are you insane?" "Maybe," Elena said. "But hiding him won't stop this. Facing it might." Before Maribel could argue, Elena unlatched the door and stepped outside. Sophia followed instantly. After a heartbeat of hesitation, Maribel joined them. The settlers reined in their horses a short distance away, hands resting on weapons. Their eyes narrowed at the sight of the three women standing calmly in front of the cabin. "We're looking for an Apache," one of the men said. "Wounded. Came this way." Elena met his gaze without flinching. "A man came asking for water," she said. "We gave it. He was hurt. We treated the wound." Murmurs rippled through the group. "You hiding him?" another demanded. "No," Maribel said firmly, surprising even herself. "We're not criminals. Neither is he." The tension stretched thin, ready to snap. Then hoofbeats sounded from the opposite direction. Apache riders emerged on the ridge, weapons visible but not raised. Taza stepped out of the cabin then, leaning heavily on the doorframe but standing tall. Both sides froze. He raised his empty hands. He spoke first to the settlers, then to his people, his voice strong despite the pain. He spoke of water given freely, of hands that healed, instead of harmed, of lives spared by a choice made without hatred. Silence followed, long, uncertain. Slowly, weapons lowered. Words were exchanged, cautious but restrained. No one won anything that morning, but no one died either. When the Apache riders finally escorted Taza away, he turned once more toward the sisters. He pressed a hand to his chest in gratitude, his gaze lingering with respect and something deeper, recognition. The settlers left soon after, shaken, uncertain, carrying a story that would spread farther than any bullet. As the dust settled and the sun climbed higher, the sisters stood together in front of the cabin. They were no longer just sheltered daughters behind a fence. They had faced the world and refused to let fear decide for them. The desert remained the same, vast, unforgiving, but something within it had shifted. And though none of them could yet see how far the consequences would reach, they all knew one truth: the night they chose compassion over fear, every life involved had been quietly, irrevocably changed.